Welcome, everybody. Before I start and introduce our guest speaker of today, I give everybody a minute to make sure that the technique is working. If you can hear me clearly, you can put a thumbs up in the chat. It's good to see many people in this webinar. Thanks, Edith, Bos, Clear. Thanks, Koen. Are there more people? Thanks a lot. Thumbs up in the chat. And while waiting, you can already look at the poll and the question that our guest speaker of today is asking us. So you can give an answer to the question. If you have a normal health and are in the age group between 20 and 60, when you get infected with corona, what is the probability that you will die? This is the question that Pierre put on the table for us. I already see some people filling in the poll, answering the poll. Okay, I think it's time to start. I see many thumbs up. So welcome at this webinar organized by Peak 4. This is a special day because today we have a professor, Professor Pierre Capelle. Pierre, warm welcome to you. Happy to see that you are healthy in these strange corona times. I can already give a cliffhanger away. Pierre will explain us today why we need to quit the lockdown as fast as possible. But besides that, Pierre will also give us more context around corona and will show why we don't have to be as experience that much fear as we have. So interesting guest. Pierre is professor in Utrecht University, and he is a professor in experiential immunology. So we have an expert in the room, and I'm personally really looking forward, Pierre, to hear your story. And for everybody in this chat room, you can, during the presentation, ask your questions in the question mark, and then we will, at the end of the 45-minute presentation of Pierre, we will come back and give time to Pierre to answer your questions. And also you can ask questions in the chat, of course. Pierre, before we start and dive into content, how are you doing in these strange corona times?
Oh, absolutely perfect. I'm amusing myself, and actually not much has changed. I still am very active, and the whole lockdown doesn't touch me that much because I am emeritus, as they call it, so I'm a pensioner, but very active. And so now I'm very happy to be in your office to give this webinar.
Maybe one more thing, Pierre, before we start. It's good to know for people that Pierre worked a lot with Wim Hof also known as the Iceman. I think that's one of the reasons why Pierre is well known. Pierre, I give the floor to you. I leave the stage, and everybody in the room enjoy the coming 45 minutes, because I know it will be impressive. Make sure that your kids are in the closet and that you can give your full attention to Pierre Capelle. Pierre, good luck and enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, welcome all of you. We will have some fun in these times because this time is dominated for many people by anxiety. And the question is, how anxious should we be? And if so, what is the real context of the threat? We go to the coronavirus and talk about facts, but I especially want to emphasize on the feelings. The facts, you will hear a lot of them, but they generate a type of feelings which are rather unhealthy and unpleasant, and is really devastating to the world economy, etc. Okay. We go back now to February. Here you see the virus with the spike proteins over here. What did we know in February? One thing is it's extremely contagious. So it hops from one person to another in a very easy way. That we knew. But the lethality, how many people die from it, was unknown in February So what was the reason to react? Is that because we had no idea, be prepared and be conscious. So this was the reaction, a total lockdown, and that was to a certain extent really correct and even understandable. However, what we see is that we get a really shitload of data of people dying, and how to cope with this, how to use these data. If you look at it, and so I was listening to the BBC, today 840 people died. Yeah, that's correct. But what is the background of the whole situation? Is everybody equally vulnerable? The answer is no. But I'm going to explain and tell you how the immunology really works. Now we are in April, or I know even almost May. We know it's highly contagious, but we know a little bit more. We now have experience about lethality. And now a funny thing appears by which we know a little more how to deal with the data. There are two completely different patterns of people who will die. And one of them pattern is the genetic susceptibility. So that means certain people are susceptible to this viral infection in a way that their immune system is inadequate, and they really have strong problems and even can die. What is this based on? And what is Mother Nature doing with us? So now I'm going to take you a little bit to the molecular world. I'm going to explain a little bit about the immunology. And please follow this introduction and see what happens. Realize that a virus infects a cell, and when it is inside the cell, the immune system can't see it. Oof, it's hidden. What did Mother Nature do? If the virus is in a cell, they chop it into little pieces, which you see here on the right. And these are small parts of the virus, but they are still inside the cell. Now we have a transport system, which is called MHC. Well, it doesn't matter how it's called. That's this molecule. That molecule catches this protein, a little peptide, which is part of the virus, puts it in its little structure. It's a little bit like a hot dog, that you have the little bread, and then the sausage is this viral peptide. And then this complex goes outside and sits on the surface of the cell and presents it to the immunological white blood cells. So the trick is that what is inside is chopped up and the little pieces are presented. And that looks like this. Here we have the molecule, and there the viral peptide will bind. But not all peptides can bind. So there is a situation that you have this presenting molecule, but the protein doesn't, the little peptide doesn't fit in. So the immune system can't see the virus. However, in 99.9% of the people, they can bind, and then you see here this red little piece. That is a viral product, and that is then presented, because it's sitting on the outside of the cell now, these specified immunological cells. Those cells will multiply like hell and can kill very effectively the virus. But the fun is that after they have done the job, they remain alert for the rest of your life. And that is the principle of vaccination and the basis of specific immunity. Okay, now if one molecule can bind a couple of peptides, There are so many different microorganisms, viruses, fungi, parasites, that you all chop them up, but you have to present them. Therefore, nature, so the total world population of mankind, has 9,000 different MHC molecules, and they can present all the possible infections, and they can also present infections which have not yet occurred but come within 300,000 years from now. They are possible, they can do everything. However, for all type of reasons, no one can have, as a person, 900 different MHC molecules, because then it also includes your own peptides, and then you will kill yourself. And therefore, Mother Nature has done the following thing. Each little dot in this slide is a MHC form, so these are, if you want to count it, these are 9,000 dots. But each individual, you as a person, don't have all of them, but have a unique combination. And here is the trick. Nobody in the world has the same combination. So everybody has his own vulnerabilities and its own strengths. And now we see this person has this combination, that one had that one, that one had that one. And now what's the consequence? Person A, they have these type of combined presenting molecules, and they are okay for yellow fever, absolutely lousy for malaria, typhus okay, and very well for corona. So this person, how does he react? That because the immune system can see the fragments of corona very well, the disease will go without symptoms and you have a strong immunity. Person B is fantastic with salmonella, but that's not the case now. He's okay with corona, and what happens? He, as a response, will have mild symptoms, but still a proper immunity. Okay, now we go to person C. Person C is fantastic with malaria, yellow fever, so la la, but corona, no, this is not the best one. So this person has an immune system which, by this combination, doesn't see corona that well. So therefore, the disease is stronger, so they will have stronger symptoms. They have a weaker immunity, and they have the possibility for a second infection because they are not so properly protected. And why is this so important? Because in the media, you hear, oh, people are not immune, or you get a second infection, or what? Yeah, ho, 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 in this group of people. But what is the frequency? Let us look at the genetic base, how the immune response to corona works. 20% of the people, and then I really have to point out in this age area, they have no symptoms. They, oh, did I have the corona? Oh, I don't know. 60% have mild, strong is 15, and really problematic is 4.99%. They are really in trouble, but 0.01% will die in this group. And if we look at the graphs, in blue is the natural death. So these are the babies who didn't make it after birth. And then, depending on the genetics, children have such a strong immune response, there are no deaths dependent on their gene. But later on, there is a little diminishing of the immune system. And then you see a very constant percentage of people who don't make it. This is the natural mortality, which is 0.4% if you are 55. It's your heart attack or whatever. So what do we see? That with the knowledge we have now, that if you are over 60, the situation is different. Here, if we look at the natural mortality, that goes up, and say if you are 95, you have almost 35% of dying just from old age or all type of trouble. In this group, the elderly group, there are very many people who have some underlying problems, some cancer, some lung problems or whatever, and they are highly vulnerable. So if we talk about 15% of the people die, yeah, in this group. But you are all in this group. And so what is the anxiety? With the knowledge we had in February, the lockdown was a proper decision. But now it's not anymore, and we have to focus on testing, testing, and testing. So my suggestion is split up the people on with medical background. So if you are really have leukemia and you are 45 and you have a terrible health problem, then Corona will strike very heavy. But for the normal situation, we can stop the lockdown, but social distance is really important because this 0.01% is a percentage. And if we keep the numbers low, then that would be better. Schools can be open without any problem because the teachers are in this age group and children have zero, nada problem. Okay, and what we should do is the social distances for a certain time, but give special care to the elderly. And so if we have people from this age group who had the infection and are immune and did not have very heavy problems, so if a nurse is ill for 3 weeks, then don't go to take care of old elderly people, even if she's cured. But if she has trouble only for say 3, 4, 5 days, then you know you can measure, but you don't need to measure it. Then the immunity is okay. And let the people from this group protect the other one. But what is Corona really doing and what are other diseases? We forgot everything. We are out of daily life, out of normal thinking. The flu. The global yearly mortality is 400,000. Poof. Measles. Parasites. Poof. Traffic accidents. 1.3 million. And now the big fun, smoking. 8 million people die from smoking, and that is really dying. And so the number of cancers is a factor 3 higher. And so what we see, we have a very selective fear of death. An unknown situation generates anxiety because it can be me. I, myself, can die, you think. It doesn't, it isn't so strong, but if you have a known situation, we accept death because death is totally normal. If you see that the last 3 months, the normal death rate is in the millions and the millions, but the fear of smoking is no fear because, okay, we know you take a cigarette and 8 million people die, but yeah, tobacco industry should go on. But the Corona death until now is 200,000. And if we compare that with all these numbers, well, it's not pleasant. I don't say underestimate the thing, but also don't overestimate. Okay, so far about Corona. But the whole world is anxious. They are worried. They have problems. People get depressed. It's really something. Does that has an effect on our health? Does our mood has an effect how Corona is dealt with? And the answer is yep. Okay, you are sick. And you don't have Corona, but you are sick in the hospital and this is your view. Okay, not fantastic. Now you have the same situation, but you look out of the window and you see this. Does it make a difference? Not that you only like it better, but on the whole disease progress, so wound healing and whatever. Once upon a time, there was a boy who had very often a strong disease and was laying in his bed when he was young. And when he was looking out of his window, he saw a tree. And he really felt supported. He felt better. And later on, this guy became a surgeon in Chicago and was working. And here you see the patient rooms. 4 of them had this terrible brick wall, and 4 of the rooms had a beautiful park. So for all the years, for 12 years, he studied all the results of the operations related to which room they were in. When there was a room with a view, and please realize this was published in Science, which is the absolute top scientific journal, the hospitalization, the number of days was shorter, less complications, lower pain medication, etc., etc. So what do we see in our brain? If we make a very simple cut through, your instincts are in the cerebellum and in the brainstem. Your feelings, that is in this whole middle part, is in the limbic system, and your thoughts are generated in the cortex. But these feelings, they are generated here in the limbic system. What they do with your body, not only giving you a fake or a pleasant feeling, no, they control a lot of functions in our DNA. Is that possible? Yes, and with our emotions. And how does that work? And now I have a little movie which has 2 types of emotions, a very quiet one and a very hectic one. And as soon as that has been shown, we will make a selfie in the sense everything you see is within 1 cell of your body to have an idea what is going on there and how all these processes are influenced by your emotions.
How does our body react to all these signals? To the noise, the stress, the peace, the harmony? Does it affect the functioning of our cells? Does it make a difference to the functioning of our DNA? The answer is yes. But if the use of DNA is changed by our emotions, how does that influence the functions of DNA, which are actually the whole steering mechanism behind the cells? From these, all kinds of molecules are formed, as we see here, which interact with each other and create connecting threads through which all kinds of particles are transported via the cytoskeleton from inside to outside, from outside to inside. How do all these things go? Here we see such a microtubule forming or degrading again, and particles are mechanically transported along it, really physical, from inside to outside, to release all kinds of molecules which are made by the DNA, and which in turn depends on our emotions. And so we see that the very small world of a cell, incredibly small, has a very big effect on our whole life, and that we can directly influence it. And how? We will see in a moment.
So what do we see? That our emotions do have an effect on the use of the DNA. Emotions don't change the DNA. The DNA is just the information chain with 4-letter code. But the genes which are laying on the DNA, they can be switched on and can be switched off. Why and how? Well, each cell in your body has the same information. So sheep Dolly was cloned from one single cell of the skin of the mother. Because in that one cell, all information for sheep Dolly was there, but it was a skin cell, and that means that in the cell, certain genes were on and off. So, for example, in the kidney, you use other functions than in the liver. So you have continuously switching on and off genes in the DNA. What we see here is the transcription factor, and here this part of the molecule binds to a specific sequence here on the DNA. When this is bound, you switch on the gene which is adjacent to it, and then the function goes on. And your emotions can activate or inactivate these type of switches. And you have about 1,500 different ones, and each of these switches are operating for about 200 or more genes.
The DNA contains all sorts of genes, about 20,000 in the case of humans. Each gene contains the information for a function performed by a protein. But whether a gene is on or off is determined separately in each cell and is regulated by those blue and red spheres, which are called transcription factors. Transcription factors scan DNA day and night, 24/7, looking for a specific code which they can recognize. Then they will bind to it and activate the gene that is located beside it. So once they have found their own code, they bind to that part of the DNA and ensure that all kinds of proteins are associated and that the entire synthesis of this protein can take place by making a copy of the DNA in the form of RNA. But one transcription factor does not only regulate one gene, but it does regulate 200 genes, or in some cases even more. So, transcription factors determine which functions are on or off in a cell, and so what this cell can do in the body. Here you see such a factor that binds and has its target over here. The piece of DNA right next to it is activated by another protein, and then the large copy machine comes into action to produce RNA. That RNA is brought into the cell and makes the function active.
Let's now have a little look what a feeling is doing with the body. Well, in this period of Corona, the idea of loneliness is not so far away. What is the physiological effect of feeling lonely? Okay, we go now to a family of rats, we're called Sprengdoli, and the females are prone to breast cancer. Rat females are very social animals, and they like to talk and cuddle with each other. And if the animals are housed in a group, then these females develop after a certain time. 20% of these ladies will have one little tumor in one of the breasts. And here you see 0% is spreading, so that is benign. Now, we break up the group, isolate them, social distancing, and what you see is that 20% now becomes 80. And it becomes metastasizing, it spreads. You say, how is that possible? just being alone makes that the tumor gets bigger, more pronounced, and starts metastasizing. I don't want to say that the lockdown we have now, that all your tumors will out, but it does have an effect. Okay, let's have a little look. There is a technique which we use in the lab. We can analyze with a chip which gene is on and off. And this is like a television screen with so many pixels. Each point is a certain genomic entity, a certain gene. If it is on or off, you can develop that, run a computer program, and here you have the change. Red is a lower expression, black is the same, green is higher. Okay, we do this test with a whole group of people who are lonely versus the people who are absolutely in similar living conditions, which are socially integrated. What we see is more than 200 important body functions are changed. And now we go back to the rats. If loneliness switches on genes on or off on the DNA, one of them, of this 200, is a gene with a beautiful name, but is a growth factor for blood vessels. So here you see the tumor making new vessels, getting more blood, food, and starts growing. And in these rats, the tumor enhances for 42 times. One of the other 200 factors, but there is really something going on, is a certain anchor molecules by which the tumor cell can leave the lymph node and the lymphatic system and goes into another tissue. As long as this anchoring molecule, which is called an adhesion factor, is not expressed, the tumor cannot spread. And now, if these ladies are very lonely, they switch on this adhesion molecule and all of a sudden start metastasizing. It's not only tumor, but let us have a little look on inflammation on the immune system and chronic stress. So that is the current situation. If we are really totally anxious and whatever, does that change our immune system? The answer is yes. Is that beneficial? The answer is no. Okay, so you have a feeling. How that works in the brain is fantastic, but that generates hormones in the pituitary, and these hormones govern the activity of transcription factors by which this feeling changes hundreds of genes in our DNA. But it's important what type of feeling. If you are really down and out and anxious and whatever, it has a very strong negative impact on health. But if you are optimistic, it has a very positive. Now, one of the factors which is directly activated or upregulated or downregulated by emotions like anxiety, loneliness, or whatever, is this beautiful guy, which is this protein here. This is the same protein, it is a couple. And here is the DNA. And this is a transcription factor, which is called NF-κB. If this goes up or down, it regulates hundreds of functions. We have seen the tumor progression or regression, blood vessel formation, but also the immune system. But NF-κB is also linked to lifespan. And if you have a chronic stress, you reduce your life with 7 years. Okay, now what we see is if we are stressed, we upregulate this transcription factor, you get a high NF-κB, and that one is generating a chronic low-grade inflammation. But if you have a chronic low-grade inflammation, you have metabolic disorders, here you have your multiple sclerosis, your Alzheimer, your high blood pressure, etc., 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 cancers. And if we summarize stress-induced chronic inflammation, cancer is going differently, but depression, Alzheimer, Parkinson, multiple sclerosis, and so we're going to go on. Diabetes, atherosclerosis, heart disease, but also hay fever is changing. So if you take it easy, you can cope with pollen a little better. But, my God, your rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, fatty liver disease. Well, yeah, okay. So what do we see? That our immune system, if it is overactivated chronically, inducing a low-grade inflammation, is the cause of all this type of trouble. But also how you deal with a viral infection or bacterial infection. So my message is, and this is the end of this talk, is that our DNA is very emotional. Not the DNA itself, but the use of it. So with your emotions, you change hundreds of functions in your body, which can be beneficial, but also very detrimental. So therefore, use it well. Now we get a little commercial. That is, I wrote a book about it, The Emotional DNA, which is the link how an emotion is directly influencing the use of DNA. Okay, this is my talk, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. And everybody who was listening to Pierre, I can recommend the book. I read it last week, and it's really interesting. And I also think, Pierre, that your talk was really interesting with a lot of scientific based information. And thanks for putting it in the Corona context too. We have a lot of questions, Pierre, so I will put some questions on the board. For example, a question, I don't know if you can see it now, but the question from Merel Bucks. Can you see it?
I see absolutely nothing. I don't see a question.
If you go to the, okay, then I will repeat the question. I try. It looks like Merel is an expert in this because she uses a lot of scientific words. But Merel's question is, do emotions only impact transcription factors or also impact epigenetic patterns of DNA? So that's the question of Merel Bucks. Thanks, Merel, for asking this question.
Merel, the answer is yes, it is doing much more. So coming to the point that DNA has all the information and that a transcription factor is one of the mechanisms to regulate genes. But if you have a very strong emotion, so really something heavy, then you activate another system, which means, and that's called epigenetics, which means that the information of a certain gene is blocked, but not blocked for a short time, but blocked lifetime. But even more terrible, that is given to the next generations. And so a very strong trauma will echo for 3 generations. And so therefore, a very heavy emotional system really changes the use of not your DNA, but they block certain genes, and it can be reversed, but it is very difficult to do that. So take care of your emotions. For example, alcoholism is genetic, but there are no genes to be found. Notice if grandpa is drinking like hell, he blocks certain genes by which alcoholism is promoted, and therefore the children have a bigger chance to get the same type of habits. It is not black and white, but yeah, take care of your emotions. pluralists.
Thank you, Pierre. Yeah, next question that is raised is, would you agree we are 100% creating our own emotions?
No, we are not only creating our own emotions, because emotions is the response to the outside world. You can have your own terrible thoughts and generate your own misery or your own happiness, but emotions are actually formed in context with the outside world. If you see somebody, then you get an interaction, and the emotion can be positive or negative. So either you fall in love or you start to hate that person. But most emotions are coming out of context with your living surroundings. So
not 100% control. I can...
No, you can't control them. Emotions are really dominant in the sense that if you feel depressed, you are not depressed for 5% or 10%. Everything is. So they are really heavy. Don't underestimate emotions. And in our medical world, if you have emotions, you go to the psychiatrist or whatever. But it induces all type negative emotions, all type of diseases. And we have in Holland the word SOLK, that is somatic, onbegrepen lichamelijke krachten, so the unexplained problems. And for example, somebody has a pain on the chest and his heart is beating like hell. Then in our current situation, the doctor sends him to the cardiologist. Then this cardiologist only finds a cardiac problem in 2% of the people, because your heartbeat, your pain on the chest can be generated by the different gene expression from emotions and has nothing to do with a problem with the heart. And so we can go on and on and on, but emotions are, it's in our society, are undervalued. And we think that we are rational people, but forget about it.
Thanks, Pierre. And hopefully the question of Edith is answered by this. I have another question. And the question is, could you explain perhaps the reliability of testing? Hence, it appears that many tests give negative response while the person has been in contact with a corona patient. How will testing help in this case? Or what kind of testing could ensure the reliability of outcome?
Okay, so there are different ways of testing. First of all, if the virus is present in your body, the viral RNA can be detected with a PCR reaction, which you really have to do on the lab. That takes a couple of hours, but that is very reliable, but labor intense and expensive. And not that easy. Not everyone can do it. You have to have a trained laboratory. Then you can see the products of the virus, so the viral proteins. That can be, say, by a swab in the throat, and then with specific antibodies, you can detect whether this protein is there or not. That's a rather okay test, but a little less watertight, so it is not always 100% clear. And then you can look if you had the disease by the presence of antibodies. But before you generate a substantial amount of antibodies, it takes 2 weeks. So if you test for antibodies in a too short period of time after the infection, it will be false negative, and 1 week later it will be positive.
Thanks.
But testing is very important.
We have more questions and we have some time. This is an interesting one. I don't know if you are the expert on this one, but Jan is asking, how can teachers keep social distance from children in school if they still need to help to go to the toilet? I don't know if this is your expertise, but maybe you can say something about it.
Well, I shall also have to go to the toilet sometimes, so that's my expertise. But of course, if you see that children have no problem with the disease, so if they catch the virus, they get rid of it very soon and clear. So the chance that a child is contagious, spreading the virus, is very little. It is not zero, but after 1 or 2 days, it should be okay. Furthermore, the teachers are not 95 years old, but in the proper age group, which really 5% can get very, very ill, and from that, the whole group, 0.1% really will die. But normally, they can cope with it rather well. So it can be that a teacher will be infected by a child, which is a very small chance. And if so, he has 80% of doing rather well and 5% of really getting into trouble. So let us hug the kids.
Okay, thanks, Pierre, for that answer. Another question about your data that you used. Is air pollution lumped into the category of death by smoking? Or do you have separate statistics on this? Because it is significant. This is what Koen is saying.
Smoking itself has its own problems, because if you analyze smoke, you have about 83 different carcinogens. You have a lot of other toxic material. Smoking is really terrible. If we look at air pollution, that's also no fun, but there can be the same type of compounds in the air pollution as are in smoke, but it is actually a little bit a separate issue. So air pollution is adding up the same as high blood pressure, the same as smoking, the same as cancer. These are all type of problems which can occur by the different items.
Thanks, Pierre. Another question from Hugo. Hugo, good that your system is working. The question is, what is a bigger risk? Exposing my children to grandmother, 74 years old, or her emotional health declining due to not seeing her grandchildren?
The children most likely are not contagious. So if grandma has no disease, the child will not transfer it and let them be together. If grandma has corona, then what the fuck, because the children have no trouble with it, only in very extreme conditions. So giddy up, go.
Hugo, I think that's a pretty clear advice from this specialist. We have some more questions, if it's okay with you, Pierre.
I'm here for this purpose.
Yeah. We have a question from Nadia. What is the best way to take care of your emotions? And then maybe starting tomorrow. I'm curious too.
Well, don't start tomorrow, start today. One of the things is that this story which I told you about the use of DNA by your emotions, that is can give devastating problems like all types of diseases or whatever. Now there is a very, very funny trick, and fasten your seatbelt. It is so simple, so cheap, but it is called meditation. But meditation is for these softies or this woo-woo-woo. Now, what happens if you meditate and you don't have to sit in the lotus position, but just be 20 minutes at ease, don't think, shut off your telephone, everything, concentrate and be in the here and now. What happens is that the blood flow in your brain changes dramatically. The hormone profile from the pituitary changed dramatically in these few minutes starting after the meditation. That downregulates the transcription factor activity back to the normal stage. And then it takes 24 hours to get overheated again. So you cannot take away your worries. your anxiety, your troubles. But by 20 minutes, peace, easy, you bring down the devastating effect of all these emotions. The emotions will be there, your anxiety will be there, but they won't harm you. I have a little example. In my kitchen, I have a concrete slab, which is 10 centimeters thick, and in there is a leaking faucet. And so if I want to repair it, I really have to break down my whole kitchen. I don't want that. So that is my trouble. But what I do is I put a little basket underneath where it drips in. And if I empty it every day, I don't have fungus, I don't have problems. And so water is leaking. So if you have problems, just try to not think about them for 20 minutes. And the other thing which I can actually promote is not only meditation, but use your muscles. Sport is healthy, everybody knows that, but non-sporting or non-moving is very unhealthy because you go in a state of hibernation, but you don't gonna lay underneath a fern and stay there for 3 months and put your body temperature down. But if you do enough exercise, which is not much, you do not really have to go to high class performances. But if you walk the dog or do a little cycling and whatever, then your muscles produce about 1,500 different myokines, they are called. And they also regulate DNA in a very proper way. So my advice is, first of all, don't worry. And meditate for 20 minutes and exercise.
Thanks, Pierre. Pretty clear and simple, but not so easy to do every day. Another question from Tim. He asked, can I actively manipulate my own emotions? For example, by make myself happier by smiling more. Maybe start with faking the smile and then it becomes real.
Yeah, you can influence your own emotions. There are beautiful studies in mice where they can see that a positive memory, so the recollection of a memory, so thinking of something you really like, activates certain neuronal circuits by which the stress response is totally inhibited. So what they did is, the technique is fantastic, but I can't explain it. They gave a mouse a specific emotion, which in the brain was labeled with a light-sensitive compound. So with a laser beam, they could reactivate a positive memory or reactivate a negative memory. Then they put them under big stress, activate with the laser beam the positive memory, and the whole stress response, the adrenaline, cortisol, was normalized. So go back to nice memories, listen to good music, look to nice, beautiful pictures, make fun, laugh. That really has a very profound physiological effect. It's not only funny or pleasant, no, please do it. So yeah, this guy who asked the question, keep on smiling.
That's pretty clear. I start smiling directly. I have a question from Bianca, who got a lot of votes, so I need to ask this one, of course. If the mix of MHCs in a person is dependent on the severity of the symptoms, why not investigate the MHCs that ensures mild symptoms, and those people are then in the clear, correct? That's the question.
The question is, once more, that if you analyze somebody's MHC, then you know what's going to happen. Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is, if the mix of MHCs in a person is dependent on the severity of the symptoms, why not investigate the MHCs that ensures mild symptoms, and those people are then in the clear?
Okay. Well, that is very well possible, but that will take a couple of years, because the number of combinations of these 40 MHC molecules is so huge that to find a specific pattern for the people who are highly vulnerable, then you have to analyze the MHC of the people on the intensive care and do a genomic study, and then you need thousands of them before you see a pattern. And furthermore, you do not establish everybody's MHC profile. So the answer to the question is, if you could do the whole analysis, then it would not change your life because the disease will be the way the disease will be. And it is very difficult to predict from the genomic constitution of the MHC how you will react.
Thanks, Pierre. Hopefully, Bianca, you're happy with the answer. I have a question from Mitchell. Pierre, we're almost there. But the question is based on the fact that we have mapped out who the risk groups are and where most of the death and burden on the healthcare system comes from. Shouldn't we go for group immunity?
Yes, but that will take some time. If we change all the rules, then we have a tough period in which a lot of people will be ill. Until now, they look at the capacity of the intensive care as a limiting condition for the number of people who are allowed, who can be infected and still get medical health. However, in the intensive care, 2/3 of the people don't make it, and 1/3 will make it, but don't ask how. They're almost invalid for more than a half year and have very strong problems. The other group who is not on the intensive care, but say the 5% who is really ill, needs medical treatment. So if we slow down the infectious rate, that is a positive thing. We do not have to do it too rigid, and group immunity will develop, and that will take some time. And yeah, and there are possibilities that vaccines are going up, are coming. In England, they made a common cold virus, included parts of the RNA of the genomic part of the corona, not a lethal information. And they start to immunize now rhesus monkeys with a positive effect. And not only antibodies, but also these cytotoxic T cells, which I mentioned, which are MHC dependent. So you measure the functionality of the MHC part. And so that looks promising, but that takes a long time before the whole world population can be get the vaccine.
Thanks a lot. There are even more questions. So first of all, people, thanks a lot for your commitment by raising so much questions. Unfortunately, we only have 1 hour. I have one question for everybody that is still listening, and that's more than 100 people. Can you, in one word, summarize in the chat how you experienced the last hour? So I see that Edith is saying, thanks, Pierre, but how do we summarize this last hour? And can you give maybe a compliment to Pierre? Because, yeah, at least my opinion is that it was a really interesting last hour. I see Pierre clarifying, thank you for this interesting topic, maybe some more words. Thanks, really super cool, well organized, informative, learned much more about DNA. Revelation on my emotions. I think Pierre, bol.com is not working now because everybody is buying your book about emotional DNA. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining this webinar and this online session. But of course, most of all, thanks to you, Pierre, that you shared your knowledge, and good luck the coming period by putting this science on the table and the facts and data. I think that's important besides all the emotions. So thanks.
Well, I would like to thank you and your whole group for this opportunity, because the real message is that people are dying. I will die, you will die, and when and how we will see. But enjoy life, because life is so beautiful. And if you are in a lockdown, you still can enjoy yourself. And instead of talking to the 100 people who are listening now, I can't see them face to face, but it's still a pleasure with a webinar, which I normally never do. Normally I talk in front of an audience. So, but it is just as joyful. So big kisses to all my people who are looking. I love you.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy life is the last word of Hugo, and I think it was the last words of you. People, enjoy the Thursday afternoon, and we will be back next week with a new webinar. Pierre, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Bye.